Miss Watson.
And I'm Miss Glenister.
And welcome to another episode of Virtual Gardening Club.
What a lovely day it is today. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and Miss Watson, are you ready for Virtual Gardening Club today? You look a little preoccupied.
Of course I'm ready for Gardening Club, Miss Glenister. I'm always ready for Gardening Club. It's just, I'm trying to work out what sort of bird this is on my fence. There's just so many birds in this book, and there's lots of possibilities, but I'm not quite sure which one it is.
Wow, how convenient, Miss Watson, because our episode today is all about birds and their place in our ecosystem. Shall we start by finding out what your bird is? Can you describe it for us?
Well, it's small and it's brown. It's quite noisy.
Perhaps it has special features or characteristics, maybe some unique markings.
Well, it does have the light brown on the top of its head and dark brown around its eyes.
That leaves us with still quite a few options of what that bird could be. There is one strategy you could use for identifying this bird. In the description, there is a link to a website where you can identify a bird through its song. Maybe you could listen to the bird singing and then you could identify it through this special website.
That's a really good idea, Miss Glenister. And I wonder whether the children at home could also help me. They could use the link in the description to try and identify the bird on my fence. They could even, when they go for walks, listen to the different bird songs and try and guess what bird might be singing.
Have you ever seen one of these before? It's a scarecrow, and it's one of the ways people sometimes try and keep birds out of the garden. This is because birds can sometimes be responsible for damaging plants that are growing as they search for their own food. Fruiting plants such as strawberries can be eaten by blue tits, starlings, pigeons, collared doves, blackbirds and thrushes.
And in the winter, when food is scarce, my leafy greens here, like my rocket, would be yummy food for pigeons.
Well, it's not all bad, Miss Watson, because some birds, like robins and blue tits for example, they eat the insects that eat your radishes, so it's good to encourage them to come into your garden. However, if you do want to discourage birds from eating your plants, there are a few ways you can do it. Probably the easiest way is to use a bit of netting over the plants that birds like to eat, like your strawberries. You can easily use some sticks you find on a walk and make a cage carefully over your strawberries. Try and make sure you pull it tight so birds and other animals don't get tangled in there. Do you ever see people feeding the birds? Maybe you've even done this yourself. What sort of food do you think is suitable to feed the birds in your garden, or the birds that you see out in parks and waterways?
I personally love putting food out for the birds, Miss Glenister. And do you know what else I love to do? I love going down to a river or a lake and feeding the ducks and swans.
Wow, Miss Watson, that's great. Although I did notice that you're using bread to feed them. Actually, bread is really bad for birds and also it pollutes the waterways. Lots of people don't realise this, and unfortunately many people do use bread to feed birds and ducks. This is something that they shouldn't really do.
Oh no, really? I've been feeding them bread for years.
No, Miss Watson, honestly it's fine. It's really important that you feed the birds in your garden because sometimes, especially in the winter months, there isn't food available for them. But perhaps instead of bread, you could use corn or oats or vegetable trimmings that you would usually put in your green waste, such as carrots.
Well, that's easy. I've got lots of kitchen scraps and you know what, I've quite often got peas and corn in my house as well, so I could just feed them those instead.
Well, that's all we have time for today in Virtual Gardening Club, I'm afraid.
I think next week we should have a look at our sunflowers as well, don't you, Miss Glenister?
Yes, I think that's a very good idea.
See you next week for another episode of Virtual Gardening Club.